The emergency lights in the council chamber cast red shadows across Commander Daesung's face. He stood in the center of the vast circular room, surrounded by hundreds of alien delegates from across the galaxy. His military uniform was crisp and clean, but his eyes were red from crying. He had not slept in 3 days. Above him, holographic screens showed the destruction of New Busan. The human colony world had been beautiful once. Green forests, blue oceans, cities that sparkled in the sunlight. Now it was nothing but ash and fire. 3 million people had died when the Rekith Empire attacked. 3 million human lives ended in a single afternoon. Daesung's hands shook as he watched the footage again. He saw buildings collapse. He saw ships trying to escape only to be shot down by Rekith warships. He saw children running through the streets, searching for their parents. He knew his sister Hana was somewhere in that chaos. She had lived in the capital city with her family. He had received no word from her. He knew what that meant. The Velman Chancellor floated at the head of the council. She was a crystalline being, her body made of something that looked like living glass. Light moved through her in strange patterns. When she spoke, her voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes. "Commander Daesung," she said, "we understand your pain. The attack on New Busan was a tragedy, but we must pursue peace through proper channels." Daesung looked up at her. His jaw was tight. "Proper channels?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent chamber. 3 million of my people are dead. The Rekith attacked without warning. They targeted civilians. They bombed hospitals and schools. And you want to talk about proper channels? A murmur ran through the council. Many of the alien delegates looked uncomfortable. They shifted in their seats or made small sounds in their various languages. Ambassador Jiwoo stepped forward. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, a diplomat who had spent 20 years building relationships with alien species. She was small and elegant, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, but now her face was pale with anger. "Chancellor," Jiwoo said, "the human delegation requests immediate military intervention. The Rekith Empire has violated every treaty, every law, every principle that this council claims to uphold. They must face consequences." The Chancellor's crystalline body flickered. "Ambassador, we cannot simply rush to war. We must investigate. We must negotiate. Violence only breeds more violence. They already brought violence." Jiwoo's voice rose. She rarely shouted, but now she could not hold back. "They brought it to our homes, to our families. We didn't start this war. We're asking you to help us end it." A Rekith delegate stood up on the far side of the chamber. He was tall and insectoid, with 4 arms and compound eyes that gleamed in the red light. "The humans invaded our territory," he said. His voice was clicking and harsh. "New Busan was built on a world that belonged to the Rekith Empire centuries ago. We simply reclaimed what was ours." Daesung took a step toward the Rekith delegate. 2 security officers moved to block him, but he stopped on his own. His fists were clenched so tight that his knuckles turned white. "That's a lie," Daesung said. "New Busan was established on an uninhabited world. Your empire had no claim to it. The council approved our colony. You have the records." The Chancellor raised one crystalline hand. "Please, everyone remain calm. We will review all evidence. But this council was founded on principles of peace and restraint. We cannot abandon those principles the moment they become difficult." "Restraint." Daesung repeated the word slowly. He looked around at all the alien faces watching him. "You want us to show restraint while our people are murdered. We want you to trust in the process," the Chancellor said. "Give us time to investigate. Give diplomacy a chance." For the next 3 hours, the council debated. Representatives from dozens of species gave speeches. Some supported humanity. They spoke about justice and the rule of law. Others worried about starting a larger war. They talked about the dangers of escalation, about how one conflict could spread across the galaxy. The Rekith delegate made threats. He said his empire was powerful and would not tolerate interference. He said humanity was weak and should accept their losses. He said the galaxy would regret standing against the Rekith. Through it all, Daesung stood silent. He listened to every word. He watched as species he thought were friends hesitated and looked away. He saw fear in their eyes. Fear of the Rekith Empire. Fear of war. Fear that made them choose the easy path instead of the right one. Finally, the Chancellor called for a vote. The question was simple. Would the Galactic Council authorize military intervention to stop the Rekith Empire? One by one, the delegates voted. The results appeared on the holographic screens. Daesung watched the numbers. His heart sank lower with each vote. When it was finished, the council had voted against intervention. Instead, they would impose economic sanctions on the Vrekith Empire. They would send a diplomatic mission to negotiate peace. They would form a committee to investigate the attack and determine responsibility. "This is justice?" Jiwoo asked. Her voice was hollow. "Sanctions and committees while our people lie dead?" "It is restraint," the chancellor said. "It is civilization. It is how we must handle such matters if we are to maintain peace in the galaxy." Daesung turned and walked toward the exit. His boots echoed on the polished floor. Jiwoo hurried after him. So did his second-in-command, Lieutenant Tae Yang, who had been waiting outside the chamber. Tae Yang was young, barely 30 years old, but he was one of the best tactical officers in the human fleet. He had been monitoring communications during the council session. Now he fell into step beside Daesung and he leaned close to whisper. "Commander," Tae Yang said quietly, "I just received word from Fleet Admiral Hyun-soo. She's authorized Protocol Ember." Daesung stopped walking. He stood in the hallway outside the council chamber, with aliens passing by on all sides, going about their business as if nothing had happened. As if 3 million humans had not just been told their deaths did not matter enough to act. Protocol Ember. Daesung knew what that meant. Every human ship captain knew what it meant. It was the authorization they hoped would never come. The permission to act without council approval. The order that said humanity would handle its own justice. Daesung looked at Tae Yang and gave a single slow nod. "How long until the fleet can assemble?" he asked. 18 hours, sir," Tae Yang replied. "Admiral Hyun-soo has already given the preliminary orders. They're just waiting for your confirmation." Jiwoo looked between them. She was a diplomat, not a soldier, but she had been around the military long enough to understand what was happening. "You're going to attack them," she said. It was not a question. "The council demanded restraint," Daesung said. He started walking again, heading toward the docking bay where his ship waited. "They'll get their wish. For the next 18 hours, we'll show restraint." After that, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Both Jiwoo and Tae Yang understood perfectly. The council had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 24 hours passed like a held breath across human space. Commander Daesung stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable, watching the stars stream past as his ship traveled through hyperspace. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. Everyone knew what was coming. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Hyun-soo sat in her office deep beneath military headquarters. She was 70 years old, with white hair and eyes that had seen 3 wars. She had hoped never to give the orders she was giving now, but the Vrekith Empire had made their choice and the Galactic Council had shown its weakness. Now humanity would respond in the only language the Vrekith seemed to understand. Hyun-soo looked at the reports on her desk. In the 24 hours since the council session, the Vrekith Empire had not stopped. They had not shown mercy or restraint. Instead, they had attacked 2 more human outposts. The mining station on Karis 7, the agricultural colony on Bright Hope. Smaller populations than New Busan, but still hundreds of lives lost. Still families destroyed. The communications kept coming in. Desperate broadcasts from survivors, video footage of Vrekith ships firing on evacuation shuttles, audio recordings of people calling for help that would not arrive in time. Each message made Hyun-soo's decision easier to bear. She opened a secure channel to 12 fleet commanders positioned throughout human space. When their faces appeared on her screen, she did not waste words. "Execute Protocol Ember," she said. "All restrictions are lifted. Show them what happens when they mistake our patience for weakness." One by one, the commanders acknowledged and signed off. Hyun-soo sat back in her chair. She thought about her grandson, who lived on a colony near the border. She thought about all the children across human space who would sleep safer after today. And she thought about the 3 million souls on New Busan who would never sleep again. Aboard the Indomitable, Engineer Bora worked in the weapons bay. She was covered in grease and sweat, her hands moving quickly across control panels that most people were never allowed to see. These weapon systems had been built in secret over the last 50 years. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council and agreed to their weapons treaties. They had limited their military technology to what the Council approved. But humanity had also learned from history. They had learned what happened to civilizations that trusted completely in others for protection, so they had built these weapons in hidden shipyards in the dark spaces between stars. They had kept them quiet and hoped never to need them. Bo-Ra activated the final system and stepped back. The railgun arrays came online, drawing power from the ship's reactor. These weapons could accelerate metal slugs to a fraction of the speed of light. At those velocities, a piece of metal the size of a fist could punch through a battleship like it was made of paper. The kinetic energy alone would vaporize anything it hit. The Council had banned such weapons centuries ago. They were too dangerous, too destructive, but the Council's laws had not saved New Busan. "Weapons ready," Bo-Ra reported to the bridge. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she spoke. She was an engineer, not a soldier. She had built these systems hoping they would never be used. Now she understood why they were necessary. Captain Sungmin commanded a destroyer on the edge of Rekith space. He was reading his orders when the encrypted message came through. He read it twice to make sure he understood correctly. Then he called his senior officers to the bridge. "We're going in," he told them. "No council approval. No rules of engagement except these. Military targets only. Civilians are not to be harmed, but anything that can fire a weapon is fair game." His tactical officer, a young woman named Yoon Seo, looked at the star charts. "Sir, we're outnumbered 8-1 in this sector. The Rekith have 3 battleships and a dozen support vessels." Sungmin smiled grimly. "They won't be expecting us. And they definitely won't be expecting what we're bringing." Across human space, similar conversations were happening on hundreds of ships. Crews that had trained for this moment but hoped it would never come. Soldiers who had sworn to protect humanity and were now being given the chance to fulfill that oath. Mi-sun was a civilian journalist working for the Intercolony News Service. She had been covering the Galactic Council session when New Busan was destroyed. Now she was aboard a transport ship heading back to Earth, using the ship's communication array to monitor military channels. She was not supposed to have access to those channels, but Mi-sun had sources throughout the fleet, contacts who trusted her to tell the truth even when the truth was difficult. One of those contacts had given her encryption codes 3 years ago, saying she might need them someday. Now Mi-sun listened as orders went out across the fleet. She heard commanders receiving their assignments. She heard coordinates being transmitted. She heard the cold, professional language of military operations and understood what it meant. Humanity was going to war. Mi-sun started recording everything. This was history happening in real time, and people needed to know about it. They needed to understand why it was happening. She began writing an article in her head, thinking about how to explain this moment to readers across human space. She remembered something her grandfather had told her when she was young. He had been a soldier in one of Earth's last wars, before humanity unified and reached for the stars. He had taught her an old saying, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, there won't be a twice." The Rekith had fooled the Galactic Council. They had convinced the aliens that sanctions and diplomacy would be enough. But they had not fooled humanity. Aboard the Indomitable, Dae-sung studied tactical displays showing Rekith positions. His second officer, Tae-yang, stood beside him, pointing out key installations. "Their main fleet is here defending the capital world," Tae-yang said, "but they have significant forces spread across 17 systems. If we hit them everywhere at once, they won't be able to coordinate a response." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Dae-sung said. He opened a channel to the other fleet commanders. 11 faces appeared on his screen, men and women he had trained with, served with, trusted with his life. "Everyone knows their targets," he said. "We jump in exactly 4 hours. Remember, we are not murderers. We are not like them. Civilian casualties are unacceptable, but military targets are to be destroyed completely. The Rekith need to understand that humanity is not prey. We are not victims. We are a threat they should have never awakened." The commanders acknowledged and signed off. Dae-sung looked at the chronometer counting down on his screen. 4 hours until they dropped out of hyperspace into Rekith territory. 4 hours until the galaxy learned what happened when you pushed humanity too far. He thought about his sister Hana. He had received confirmation now. She and her family had been in one of the first buildings hit. They had died instantly, according to the reports. He supposed that was a mercy. At least they had not suffered, but 3 million others had suffered. The survivors from New Busan told stories of Rekith soldiers hunting people through the ruins, of ships being shot down as they tried to evacuate, of children crying for parents who would never answer. The Galactic Council had called for restraint. They had called for patience and diplomacy. They had called for humanity to trust in the process. And while humanity waited for that process, the Rekith had killed hundreds more. Daesung looked around his bridge. His crew was ready. Bora had the weapons online. Taeyang had the tactical plans prepared. Every system on the ship was operating at peak efficiency. In 4 hours, the Rekith Empire would learn a lesson. The same lesson that predators throughout Earth's history had eventually learned. Some prey animals, when cornered, when hurt, when pushed beyond endurance, would turn and fight back. And when they fought with everything they had. Humanity had tried to be peaceful. They had tried to follow the Council's rules. They had tried to be civilized members of a galactic community. The Rekith had mistaken that choice for weakness. They would not make that mistake again. The chronometer continued its countdown. 3 hours and 57 minutes until the fleet arrived. 3 hours and 57 minutes until the Rekith Empire learned why. Humanity's ancestors had climbed to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. Daesung watched the numbers tick down and felt nothing but cold determination. The Council had demanded restraint yesterday. Today, humanity would deliver justice. The Rekith home system had been quiet for 300 years. Their empire had grown powerful through conquest and intimidation, but their core worlds had never faced attack. The capital planet Rekka Prime orbited a yellow sun much like Earth's. Billions of Rekith lived there in vast hive cities that stretched into the clouds. Defense stations surrounded the planet like a shell. Hundreds of automated weapons platforms, shield generators, and sensor arrays. The Rekith military command believed their homeworld was impregnable. They had designed the defenses to stop any fleet the Galactic Council could send. They had not designed them to stop humanity. Commander Daesung's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. 12 human warships appeared simultaneously, their arrival creating ripples in space that the Rekith sensors detected immediately. Alarms began sounding across the defense network. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Daesung watched as the tactical display filled with enemy contacts. Hundreds of defense platforms, dozens of Rekith warships on patrol, enough firepower to destroy his fleet 3 times over, if they followed standard combat doctrine. But humanity was done following anyone else's rules. All ships, execute pattern Delta 7, Daesung ordered calmly. His voice carried to every ship in the fleet through encrypted channels. Engage railgun systems. Target only military installations, no civilian structures. I want that absolutely clear. Lieutenant Jae-hyun, humanity's best tactical officer, stood at the weapons console. He was 35 years old and had spent his entire adult life studying warfare. He had run simulations of this exact scenario 5,000 times in the last 3 years. He knew every Rekith defensive position, every response they could make, every weakness in their system. Targets locked, Jae-hyun reported. Firing solutions calculated for the first wave. Fire, Daesung said. The railguns spoke. From the outside, it looked like nothing at first. Just subtle flashes of light from the human ships. But those flashes were metal slugs accelerating to incredible speeds. They crossed the distance to the Rekith defense platforms in seconds. The first platform exploded without warning. One moment it was scanning for targets, the next moment a piece of metal moving at a fraction of light speed punched through it. The kinetic energy release was equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The platform simply ceased to exist, becoming an expanding cloud of debris. Then the second platform exploded. Then the third. Then 10 more in rapid succession. On Rekka Prime, the military command center erupted in chaos. Alarms blared. Screens showed defense platforms winking out one after another. The Rekith commanders could not understand what was happening. Their shields were not being penetrated. They were being obliterated. The human weapons simply ignored their defenses, passed through them as if they were not there at all. A Rekith admiral tried to coordinate a response. He ordered the battleships to advance and engage the human fleet. He activated the planetary shields. He called for reinforcements from nearby systems. Jae-hyun watched it all happen and smiled coldly. He had predicted this exact response in simulation 2347. He knew what the Rekith would do before they did it. Enemy battleships moving to intercept, he reported. Just as calculated. Adjusting targeting to pattern Delta 8. The human fleet split into 3 groups. They did not retreat or try to avoid the Wrecketh battleships. Instead, they accelerated toward them, their railguns firing constantly. More platforms exploded. Wrecketh ships that moved into firing positions found themselves targeted by multiple human vessels at once. A Wrecketh battleship, massive and powerful, lined up its weapons on the Indomitable. Its commander gave the order to fire. Energy beams and missiles launched toward the human ship. The Indomitable's defensive systems engaged. Point defense lasers destroyed incoming missiles. Shield generators deflected energy beams. The ship shuddered from impacts, but its armor held. At the same time, 3 human ships fired their railguns at the Wrecketh battleship. The slugs hit the alien vessel from different angles. The first shot penetrated the forward shields and tore through the ship's bow. The second shot hit the reactor section. The third shot passed completely through the ship from top to bottom. The battleship broke apart in a series of explosions. Atmosphere vented into space. Escape pods launched in every direction as the crew abandoned ship. The human fleet did not fire on the escape pods. They let them go, tracking them only to make sure none tried to return to the fight. Within 20 minutes of arriving in the system, the human fleet had destroyed 43 defense platforms and 3 battleships. The Wrecketh were in full retreat, pulling their remaining ships back behind the planetary shields. Admiral Yoon Seo commanded one of the other human fleets operating in a different Wrecketh system. She was 50 years old, a career officer who had risen through the ranks through skill and determination. Now she watched as her ships engaged a Wrecketh military shipyard. The shipyard was massive, capable of building capital ships. It orbited an uninhabited moon, far from any civilian populations. Yoon Seo had confirmed that 3 times before giving the order to engage. Humanity's rules of engagement were absolute, no civilian casualties. But military targets were to be destroyed completely. Target the shipyard's reactor cores, she ordered. I want nothing left that can be used to build more warships. Her fleet's railguns opened fire. The first shots destroyed the shipyard's defensive systems. The following shots methodically tore the structure apart. Section by section, Wrecketh ships under construction broke apart and drifted into space. Construction equipment exploded. Fuel storage tanks detonated in brilliant flashes. Within an hour, the shipyard was nothing but wreckage. In orbit above Rekka Prime, Dae-sung opened a channel on all frequencies. Every Wrecketh ship, every station, every communication device in the system would receive his message. This is Commander Dae-sung of the Human Defense Fleet, he said. His voice was cold and clear. You attacked our colony world without provocation. You murdered 3 million civilians, including women and children. You destroyed hospitals and schools. You shot down evacuation ships. And when we asked the Galactic Council for justice, you laughed and claimed you were in the right. He paused, letting his words echo through the system. We are not here to conquer your world. We are not here to kill your civilians. We are here to destroy your ability to make war. Every military installation in this system is now a target. Every warship that does not surrender will be destroyed. Your shipyards, your weapons factories, your military bases, all of them will be reduced to debris. On the planet below, Wrecketh civilians watched the battle in the sky. They saw their supposedly invincible fleet being torn apart. They saw defense platforms that were supposed to protect them exploding one after another. Many of them had never imagined their world could be attacked. The Wrecketh Empire had always been the aggressor, never the victim. Now they learned what it felt like to be on the other side. Dae-sung continued his broadcast. Your military leaders tell you that humanity is weak, that we are prey to be hunted. They are wrong. We chose peace. We chose restraint. We chose to follow the Council's laws. You mistook those choices for weakness. Another Wrecketh battleship tried to break through the human formation. Railgun fire from 4 human ships converged on it. The battleship's shields collapsed. Its armor cracked. Escape pods launched as the crew abandoned the doomed vessel. We gave you every chance to stop, Dae-sung said. After New Busan, we went to the Council. We asked for justice through proper channels. And while we showed restraint, you attacked 2 more of our colonies. You killed hundreds more of our people. Across the Wrecketh Empire, similar scenes were playing out. Human fleets appeared in 17 systems simultaneously. They struck military targets with precision that the Wrecketh had never seen before. Command centers exploded. Fleet anchorages burned. Supply depots were destroyed. Training facilities were reduced to rubble. And through it all, not a single civilian structure was damaged. The humans were surgical in their violence. They killed soldiers and destroyed weapons, but they left cities and homes untouched. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates watched the battle in shock. Long-range sensors and communication relays brought them images of the human attack. They saw the Rekith military being systematically dismantled. They saw weapons that should not exist according to Council treaties. They saw a level of tactical coordination that most species could not achieve. The Velman Chancellor watched in silence. She had demanded that humanity show restraint. She had told them to trust in the process, to let diplomacy work. Now she saw the result of her advice. The humans had waited, had shown restraint, and more of their people had died. Now they were showing what they could do when restraint was removed. On the Indomitable, Bora monitored the weapon systems from the engineering deck. The railguns were operating perfectly, firing shot after shot with mechanical precision. She watched the power levels, made small adjustments to keep everything running smoothly. She thought about the people on New Busan. She had never been there, but she had seen the pictures. Beautiful parks, clean streets, children playing. All of it gone now. The railguns fired again. Another military platform exploded in the distance. Bora felt no joy in the destruction. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the third time in as many days. The chamber was packed. Delegates from every member species had arrived, many of them demanding to speak. The holographic screens that surrounded the room showed images from across Rekith space. Human fleets engaged in combat. Military installations burning. Rekith ships retreating or surrendering. The Velman Chancellor floated at her position, her crystalline body flickering with agitation. She had served as Chancellor for 40 years and had never seen anything like this. Member species did not attack each other. That was the fundamental rule of the Council. Disputes were resolved through diplomacy, not warfare. But the humans had ignored that rule. They had launched a military campaign without Council approval. And worst of all, they were winning. The Council demands that humanity cease all military operations immediately, the Chancellor announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber. Commander Daesung, you are in violation of 17 treaties and 43 Council regulations. You must withdraw your forces at once. A holographic projection of Daesung appeared in the center of the chamber. He stood on the bridge of his ship, his uniform clean despite 3 days of constant combat. Behind him, crew members moved efficiently at their stations, the image of a military operation running smoothly. Daesung looked around at all the alien faces staring at him. He saw anger. He saw fear. He saw the same hesitation and weakness that had allowed the Rekith to attack in the first place. Chancellor, he said calmly, with respect, the Council's demands carry no weight with me anymore. A shocked murmur ran through the chamber. Several delegates made sounds of outrage in their various languages. You dare defy the Council? A delegate from the Korthan species demanded. He was a large, bear-like creature with brown fur and sharp teeth. We are the governing body of the galaxy. You must obey our authority. Daesung raised one hand. The gesture was simple, almost casual. But it carried such authority that the entire Council fell silent. Delegates who had been about to speak stopped. Even the Chancellor seemed taken aback. That was yesterday, Daesung said quietly. The words hung in the air like a pronouncement, like a door closing, like the end of something that could never be brought back. Yesterday we believed in the Council, Daesung continued. His voice was soft, but it reached every corner of the vast chamber. Yesterday we thought the galaxy had laws that would protect innocent people. Yesterday we trusted that if we followed the rules, others would too. He gestured behind him and the screens in the Council chamber changed. They showed footage from New Busan. Bodies in the streets. Buildings collapsed. Children crying. Ships exploding as they tried to evacuate. This is what happened yesterday while we showed restraint, Daesung said. 3 million of my people died. We came to you and asked for help. We asked for justice. We asked the Council to enforce its own laws. The Chancellor tried to interrupt. We were investigating. We were pursuing diplomatic solutions. You were doing nothing. Daesung's voice grew harder. You voted for sanctions that would take months to implement. You formed committees that would take years to make decisions. You asked us to be patient while our people died. Ambassador Jiwoo stepped forward next to Daesung's hologram. She looked tired. She had not slept properly in days, but her voice was steady and clear. The day after the council voted, Jiwoo said, the Rekith attacked 2 more human colonies. Hundreds more dead. The council's diplomatic approach had not deterred them. Our restraint had not protected our people, so we stopped waiting for permission to defend ourselves. Another alien delegate stood. This one was from the Pelquin species, small and bird-like with colorful feathers. But you are using weapons that violate council treaties. Kinetic weapons of that magnitude are banned by treaties that assume everyone follows them, Jiwoo replied. The Rekith violated every treaty about civilian protection. They violated laws against targeting medical facilities and evacuation ships. They broke the rules first. We simply stopped pretending the rules still applied. The screens changed again. Now they showed footage from the human military operations, but not the battles. Instead, they showed escape pods being allowed to drift away, showed human ships bypassing civilian vessels, showed precise targeting that avoided any non-military structures. Look at what we are doing, Daesung said. We are destroying military targets. Only military targets. We have not fired a single shot at a civilian. We have not bombed cities or schools or hospitals. We are fighting a war, but we are fighting it with honor. He paused and looked directly at the Rekith delegate who sat in the chamber. The insectoid alien tried to meet his gaze but looked away. Can your empire say the same? Daesung asked. When you attacked New Busan, did you show restraint? Did you avoid civilians? Did you let evacuation ships escape? The Rekith delegate said nothing. That is what I thought, Daesung said coldly. Ambassador So-jin stepped into view next to Jiwoo. She was young for an ambassador, barely 40, but she had been preparing for this moment since the attack on New Busan. She carried a datapad containing Earth's official position, approved by every human government. The human delegation wishes to present a proposal, So-jin said formally. We believe the current council system has failed in its primary purpose, which is to protect member species from aggression. The council system is sound, the chancellor protested. It has maintained peace for 1,000 years. It has maintained peace for species strong enough to defend themselves, So-jin corrected, and for species too weak to be worth attacking. But when a strong empire decides to prey on a weaker neighbor, the council does nothing. It talks, it forms committees. It studies the problem, and while it talks, people die. She activated her datapad, and new information appeared on the screens around the chamber, a list of attacks over the last century, small species absorbed by larger empires, border disputes that ended with the weaker side simply disappearing, colony worlds claimed by whoever had the bigger fleet. These are the council's failures, So-jin said. Every one of these situations was brought before the council. Everyone was resolved through the same diplomatic process that you wanted us to trust, and in every case the strong took what they wanted while the weak suffered. A delegate from the Thrani species stood. They were an aquatic people, living in suits filled with water. What are you proposing? That we abandon law and diplomacy? That we resolve every dispute through warfare? No, So-jin said firmly. We are proposing that the council's laws have actual enforcement, real consequences for those who break them. Not sanctions and committees, but immediate military response. She uploaded a document to the council's systems. It appeared on every delegate's screen simultaneously. The Human Proposed Mutual Defense Treaty, So-jin announced. Any unprovoked attack on civilian populations of a council member will trigger automatic military intervention by all other members. Not a vote, not a debate. Automatic response within 24 hours. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted at each other. Some supported the idea immediately. Others called it impossible. The Rekith delegate and his allies protested loudly, calling it an attack on their sovereignty. Daesung watched it all with a cold expression. Then he spoke again, and once more his voice cut through the chaos. This is not a request, he said. This is not something we are asking permission for. We are telling you how things are going to work from now on. Because humanity learned a lesson over the last few days. We learned that we cannot trust others to protect our people. We can only trust ourselves. You cannot dictate terms to the council, the chancellor said. We are not dictating to the council, Jiwoo replied. We are offering you a choice. Join us in creating a galaxy where attacks like New Busan bring immediate consequences. where empires cannot murder millions and then hide behind diplomatic process. Or do not join us and watch as humanity withdraws from the Council entirely and enforces our own justice. The threat was clear. If the Council did not accept the new treaty, humanity would leave. And without humanity, the Council would lose one of its most powerful military forces. More importantly, it would lose credibility. If humans could leave and defend themselves successfully, other species would question why they needed the Council at all. In the viewing gallery above the main chamber, journalist Misun recorded everything. She had been granted special access to observe the session, and she was documenting every moment. This was history. This was the day the galaxy changed forever. She watched as delegates argued and debated. She saw fear in some of their eyes, fear of humanity's military power, fear of what it meant that humans had weapons the Council did not know about, fear that if humans could ignore the Council, others might too. But she also saw something else. She saw delegates from smaller species looking at the humans with hope, species that had lived under the threat of larger neighbors, species that had trusted the Council to protect them and had been disappointed. They saw humanity stand up and fight back. They saw humans destroy a powerful empire's military in days. And they wondered if maybe, just maybe, the galaxy could be a place where being small or P. 3 weeks had passed since Commander Daesung's fleet first entered Vrekith space. 3 weeks that changed the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Hyun-Soo stood at the window of her office on Earth, looking out at the city below. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She held a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago, forgotten as she reviewed reports from across human space. The war was over. The Vrekith Empire had surrendered 2 days ago, signing an unconditional surrender document that would reshape their entire civilization. Their military had been reduced to less than 20% of its original strength. 17 shipyards destroyed, 43 military bases reduced to rubble, over 200 warships destroyed or captured, and in all that destruction not a single Vrekith civilian had been killed by human weapons. The humans had proven they could wage war with devastating efficiency while maintaining absolute precision. They had shown that it was possible to destroy an enemy's ability to fight without becoming monsters themselves. The surrender terms were harsh, but fair. The Vrekith Empire would pay reparations to rebuild New Busan and compensate the families of those killed. The payments would continue for 50 years, enough to build 10 new colonies of the same size. Vrekith military forces would be limited to defensive operations only. Their shipbuilding would be monitored by human observers for the next decade. Some people called it justice. Others called it revenge. Hyun-Soo thought it was simply consequences. The Vrekith had attacked humanity believing there would be no real price to pay. They had been wrong. She set down her cold tea and picked up another report. This one made her smile just slightly. The Galactic Council had voted on humanity's proposed treaty. After 2 weeks of intense debate, after dozens of amendments and compromises, after threats and negotiations and political maneuvering, the vote had finally come. The Mutual Defense Treaty had passed, barely, but it had passed. The treaty stated that any unprovoked attack on civilian populations would trigger mandatory intervention by Council forces. Not optional, not subject to debate, mandatory. Any member species that attacked civilians would face the combined military might of the entire Council within 48 hours. The treaty also established clear rules of engagement. Military targets were legitimate. Civilian populations were absolutely protected. Any force that violated these rules would themselves become targets of Council intervention. It was not perfect. There were loopholes and exceptions that Hyun-Soo did not like. But it was better than what came before. It was a galaxy where the strong could not simply prey on the weak without consequences, and it had only happened because humanity had been willing to fight. At the Galactic Council chambers, the Velman Chancellor prepared for a historic session. Today, Commander Daesung would address the Council for the final time before returning to Earth. Today, they would formally sign the new treaty and begin a new era of galactic governance. The Chancellor still felt conflicted about everything that had happened. On one hand, the humans had violated laws and treaties. They had acted without Council approval. They had used weapons that were supposed to be banned. On the other hand, they had been right. The Council had failed. It had let the Vrekith attack with impunity. It had chosen process over justice, diplomacy over protection. And 3 million humans had died because of that choice. The Chancellor would never admit it publicly, but privately she was grateful for what humanity had done. They had forced the Council to confront its own weakness. They had pushed the galaxy to create better systems, stronger protections, real consequences for aggression. Sometimes, the Chancellor thought, peace required the threat of war, and sometimes civilization needed warriors willing to fight for it. The chamber filled with delegates. Every species sent their highest representatives. This was not just another council session. This was history being made. Commander Dae Sung entered the chamber flanked by Admiral Hyun Soo and Ambassador Ji Woo. He wore his full dress uniform, decorated with medals from decades of service. He looked tired. The last 3 weeks had aged him years. But he stood straight and proud as he took his position at the center of the chamber. Next to him, a holographic display showed images from New Busan. Not the destruction this time, but the rebuilding. Construction crews were already at work. Ships brought supplies and equipment. Survivors were returning to reclaim their world. One image showed a temporary memorial that had been built. 3 million names carved into stone, one for every person killed in the attack. Dae Sung's sister Hana was on that wall, along with her husband and 2 children. Their names would be remembered forever. Commander Dae Sung, the Chancellor said formally, you have been invited to address this council before we sign the new treaty. You have earned that right through your actions, even if some of us question the methods you used. Dae Sung nodded. He had prepared a speech, but now looking at all these alien faces, he decided to speak from his heart instead. 3 weeks ago, I stood in this chamber and asked for help, he began. My people had been attacked. Millions were dead, and I believed, truly believed, that the Council would stand with us, that the laws and treaties we had all signed meant something. He paused, looking at the Rekith delegate who sat quietly in the back of the chamber. The delegate was new, the previous one having resigned in disgrace. This one had the sense to look ashamed. You asked us to show restraint, Dae Sung continued, to trust in the process, to give diplomacy time to work. And for 24 hours we did. We showed restraint while more of our people died. We trusted the process while our colonies burned. Ambassador Sojin stood and walked to stand beside Dae Sung. She activated her data pad, and new images appeared on the screens. These showed other conflicts across the galaxy over the last century. Small species absorbed, colonies destroyed, peoples displaced. The Council has asked for restraint many times, Sojin said. Always from the victims, never from the aggressors. And so the strong continued to prey on the weak, because they knew there would be no real consequences. A delegate from the Pelquin species stood. But you violated Council laws yourself. You used banned weapons. You attacked without authorization. Yes, Dae Sung admitted simply. We did. Because we learned that following the laws did not protect our people. Following the laws just made us easy targets. Admiral Hyun Soo stepped forward. At 70 years old, she was the oldest person in the chamber. She had seen more war than anyone present, and her words carried the weight of that experience. Every human hopes this treaty works, she said. We hope it creates a galaxy where no one else has to make the choice we made. Where no other species has to decide between following the law and protecting their families. She looked directly at the Chancellor. But understand this, humanity will never again wait for permission to defend ourselves. We will follow this treaty because we believe it is right. But if it fails, if the Council proves unable to protect the innocent, we will act on our own, and other species will do the same. The threat was clear, and it hung in the air like smoke. The Council had to work, had to enforce its own laws, or it would become irrelevant. Species would look at humanity's example and realize they did not need the Council's permission to defend themselves. Lieutenant Tae Yang sat in the viewing gallery, watching the proceedings. Next to him was journalist Mi-sun, still recording everything. She had followed this story from the beginning, and now she would document its conclusion. Do you think the treaty will work? She asked Tae Yang quietly. He considered the question. I think it will work as long as species remember what happened when it did not exist. As long as they remember New Busan. As long as they remember that humanity fought back and won. Mi-sun nodded and made notes. She had already written most of her article. It would run in every human publication and be translated into dozens of alien languages. Future generations would read it and understand this moment, when the galaxy changed from hoping for peace to enforcing it. In the chamber, the signing ceremony began. The Velman Chancellor placed her mark on the treaty first, using a crystalline stylus that glowed with inner light. Then each delegate came forward in turn, adding their species signature to the document. When it was humanity's turn, Admiral Hyun Soo signed for Earth. Her handwriting was steady and clear. Beside her name, she wrote a single sentence that would become famous across the galaxy. "We remember the 3 million. We will protect the billions." After all the signatures were collected, the treaty was officially enacted. It would take effect immediately, giving the Council real enforcement power for the first time in its history. The Reketh delegate stood to speak, his voice hesitant. "On behalf of the Reketh Empire, I wish to apologize to humanity for the attack on New Busan. We have no excuse for what was done. We accept full responsibility and will honor the terms of our surrender. It was not enough. No apology could bring back the dead. But it was a start. It was acknowledgement. It was the beginning of justice, even if justice could never be complete." Daesung looked at the Reketh delegate for a long moment. Then he nodded once, accepting the apology without forgiving the crime. The session ended and delegates began to leave the chamber. Many of them approached the human delegation to offer private words.